How's it going, everybody? The voice of Ed Ricker here again. I have another video comparing the Mavic 2 Pro to the Mavic 2 Zoom. The last video I did was all day shots, and it was okay, but a lot of people said where the difference really lies is in low light conditions. So this is all night footage of various skylines, parking lots, and churches that seem to be illuminated after hours. Now, according to the FAA, you cannot fly commercially at night in the United States, but I chose to fly recreationally and I'm not monetizing this video. Second of all, I do suggest that everyone be careful when flying at night. I've flown around all these different places during the day, so I know that everything was free from power lines and any other obstacles. I knew exactly where I was. All right, here we go. We're gonna compare some footage here. So this is Raleigh, North Carolina, around 10 p.m. and we're starting with the zoom. 4K, 24 frames per second. We have the ISO all the way up, 3200, and shutter speed, twice our frame rate. Well, roughly twice our frame rate anyway. And you can see that we see points of light, but we're really having a hard time seeing any sort of detail. And then we're going to flip to the Pro version, max ISO, which is 6400, and we see a lot more of the skyline. Look at that. That's a big difference. Now the Pro version is currently shooting at full field of view mode. We're going to switch that to HQ, high quality mode, punches in a little bit more, and same settings. It looks pretty good. Now we're going to go back to the zoom, and yeah, we just lost a lot of detail, and we can only really see the light, so we can't see the ground very much that's illuminated, whereas with the Pro, we can see the street, we can see parking lots, we can make out houses. It's great. Switching to HD mode, zoomed in. That's one of the good things about the zoom. However, we don't really see a whole lot zoomed in. I mean, we see the tops of these buildings a little bit, and little flashes of lights and that type of thing. But yeah, kind of lackluster with the zoom. So the Pro is definitely winning with this skyline. The Pro also has a couple different color modes. We can select normal color profile here, HLG Color Profile, which adds a little bit of grain, a little bit of distortion. HLG stands for Hybrid Log Gamma, and the Log Color Profile, a little bit smoother, but that's more color gradable. I think for our purposes though, for nighttime footage, normal color profile is best. Then I took the drones to a parking lot, which had a lot of lights in the parking lot. I was constantly looking over my shoulder, making sure I wasn't about to get mugged. Luckily, the drone could see behind me when I was not. Now with the Pro version, this works out pretty well. You can get some pretty interesting shots, and the exposure is decent, even though it was pretty dark out there. In the HLG version, it actually looks pretty bright. We could definitely work with that image. That's great. We move on to the zoom version though, and we definitely see everything got a lot darker. We could bump this up a little bit, in post-production, raise the exposure, raise the highlights a bit, but then we'd start to struggle with some of that grain that we would introduce into the image. So I think for right now, we really see that the Pro is performing much better. I also found this other parking lot with lights that had a slightly different color temperature. And I love this scene. It just looks so cool. I'm glad they left the lights on for me. The zoom was having a little bit of an issue. You could really only see directly under each light. Otherwise, there wasn't a whole lot of detail on the cement. But we go to the Pro version and it's just fully illuminated. That's awesome. You could definitely shoot a movie scene or something in here. I also got a little bit creative with the angles shooting this parking lot. It's just a really cool parking lot. I think they're doing something with it. Maybe there's some sort of construction happening nearby, but all the lights were on. No light bulbs were burnt out, so it looked really great. So for all these so far, my ISO has been all the way up. My aperture has been all the way open at 2.8 on both drones, and 1/50th shutter speed. If we wanted it even brighter, we could go to a lower shutter speed, but for video, we don't necessarily want to go too much slower on the shutter speed. And I was driving by and I saw this church. I wanted to see if I can get some good shots of it. The Pro is performing really well getting the shot here, whereas the zoom is kind of struggling. You can really only see the brightest parts of the building and the brightest parts of the parking lot. The Pro is just blowing this thing right out of the water. I also decided to take a few pictures, and I'm not going to show you every single picture, but I kind of experimented between high ISO and high shutter speed. So with the Mavic 2 zoom looking off into the skyline, 3200 ISO, 1/30th shutter speed, that doesn't look too impressive to me. But what I can do is lower my shutter speed to 1/5 of a second. And I definitely have some more highlights and some more things to work with there. But I lower my ISO to 800, and then I slow down my shutter speed to 1 second, and we have our detail back with our zoom image. Now, this would not work if you have a whole lot of motion in your shot. It also wouldn't work very well if it was a very breezy or windy day. We also have a couple different picture modes, one being Hyperlight, really accentuates some of those highlights of the buildings. It creates actually a pretty cool glow on the skyline, so that was nice. It also has HDR, high dynamic range. That didn't change things too much. It's better than shooting normally, but it doesn't add quite so much of the glow and highlight accentuation of the Hyperlight mode. I think the sweet spot for normal shooting though was 1600 ISO at 1 second shutter speed on a still day. Now we're going to the Pro versions. Some of these pictures are not in the exact same shape and resolution, but eventually I do get everything to a 16:9 picture ratio. So we're showing 400 ISO, half shutter speed, and we see a whole lot more detail in this image. This is a great image. Hyperlight looks amazing with the Pro. Just look at those colors. That's amazing. And then our HDR image also brings out a lot. We see a little more detail in some of those highlights, and the image is still very bright. Here in the parking lot, a picture with the Mavic 2 zoom at 3200 ISO and 1/12.5 second shutter speed. In this situation, switching to Hyperlight really didn't do a whole lot, and switching to HDR really didn't do a whole lot either. But with the Mavic 2 Pro, Hyperlight brings out those headlights a little bit more and creates a bit of a glow. And then we also have our HDR version of the image as well. Finally, our Mavic 2 zoom at the church, 800 ISO at 1/6 shutter speed. This is pretty well balanced in terms of trying to expose for everything in the picture without blowing out the highlights in the center. However, our HDR is really bringing out some of the detail, especially in the background, in the parking lot, and on the roof of this building. And then Hyperlight's nice here, but it does blow out the center of the image. So you gotta be careful of that. If there's something really bright in the image, you might end up with a blown out Hyperlight. Here's our regular image, and then we go to our Hyperlight image. Again, a little blown out. Everything is brighter though. But our HDR image, now that's nice, that's beautiful. So switching back and forth between HDR with Pro and HDR with our zoom, everything is much more clear in the Pro. I want to also zoom in on these pictures and these videos a bit just to see what it looks like at 400 or even 800% scaled up. At 400 ISO, you can really see that the Pro is showing a lot more detail, and the lines look much cleaner on some of these buildings as we zoom in. Scaling up these pictures with my face, you can also see that my face is much sharper in the Pro version. Although I will say with Hyperlight, it looks like there's a little more grain in the image with the Pro version. With the HDR image, we see a little more grain in the zoom image and not so much in the Pro anymore. So things have balanced out with the HDR, but with Hyperlight, there is noticeably more noise in the image with the Pro version. You can also really see a difference here at the church with the HDR image. When you scale up the zoom image, very, very blurry. You switch to the HDR image of the Pro and everything looks really solid. So I don't think that these results are anything that we're surprised about, but it is confirmation of what we were already thinking, and I'm glad to be able to showcase the difference between the two cameras and just how good this Mavic 2 Pro camera is in low light. Thanks so much for watching, everybody.